If you're working in e-commerce, you will need to present data in PowerPoint. But even if you have the most insightful data, people will not listen to you if they don't think it's interesting and related to their work, which means you've just wasted a lot of time and effort. This is why you need to add storytelling into your presentations. So let me share a simple 3-step framework that I learned while working in e-commerce and presenting data weekly for the past 7 years. Hello data people, I'm Robert from Clicks.ly and I'm here to help you understand and analyze data to make better decisions in e-commerce. So that takes me nicely to the framework we're going to use. It's based on the SCR framework. This is a widely used framework in the big consulting companies like McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG, and so on. However, I find it a bit too corporate, so I've taken it and modified it and changed a few steps so that it's a little bit more approachable and more applicable for e-commerce. So the framework we will use is called BPS. It stands for background, problem, and solution. It is based on the same idea as any story you see in the movies because every story has a beginning, middle, and end, or Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. These are the fundamental pieces of any story. Let's start with the step that most people forget in their presentations, but it's essential so that your audience understands the whole picture before you dive deeper. The first part is to establish the background. During these slides, you make sure that your audience knows enough context to understand your main point. Here, you can also tell how you've discovered your main argument. This is usually the shortest part of your presentation, and just in general, the length varies depending on your topic and audience. The less the audience knows, the more you might need to provide context to them. You can begin by clarifying why you're presenting this data, what triggered the analysis, was there a specific question, concern, or maybe opportunity that led you to dig into the data? For extra credibility, you can add a real customer story or show a screen recording from Hotjar of a real user struggling with your website. It's one thing to hear that your customers are struggling and a whole other story to actually see them struggle in the screen. You see they're clicking on stuff, but it just is not working. It is just mind-blowing and people respond better to that. Now, you might be thinking that mentioning the background is an unnecessary step for meetings that are recurring or for internal team. But the idea is to set up the context for why this analysis is crucial and why the audience should care. You need to tell them what's at stake. Otherwise, they'll be just on their laptops doing their stuff while watching your presentation. For example, you could say something like this. Our checkout conversion rate is usually around 75%, but I noticed that 2 weeks ago it dropped by 15% and has stayed there ever since. If this continues, it will cost us $500,000 a year. So today I'll show you what I think is causing this and I'll suggest the next steps to fix it. After establishing the background, the next step is the most important part of your presentation. This is where you will spend most of your time anyway, as you will need to describe the problem and back it up with data. This is where your deep dive into data will shine. You need to convince your audience that you've found the problem and what is causing it, based on data obviously, and why the team must act now to fix it. So let me just continue with my example, something short like this. After further research, I discovered that the main issue with our checkout conversion rate was our new Apple Pay feature. As you can see, compared to PayPal Express, which is also a fast checkout option, you'll notice that a huge difference in conversion rate. And in this slide, you can see how the month-over-month comparison shows 12% dip in conversion rate for Apple Pay. The next slide shows you how the issue seems to be with iOS Safari browser. It's the only browser with a significant dip in conversion rate during the last 2 weeks. But to really emphasize why this is important, make sure to connect the insights to the business impact. Put some rough estimates behind it, either the money you're losing or the time you're wasting. And just remember to convert time to cost as well. Keep in mind that by not implementing something, you might be missing out on revenue as well. You can also put this as an opportunity cost because management seems to react only when they see this can hurt or grow their bottom line. So here's an example that I can give you. If the Apple Pay conversion rate stays at this rate for the rest of the year, we will lose about $500,000 in revenue. And I expect that we will also get thousands of customer care requests, which according to the service team, cost about an additional $50,000 in wasted time and time that they could help clients choose the right product. Notice how I position it in revenue terms, and this will turn heads. If you hear $500,000 or whatever sum is a lot to your company, people will start caring. By the way, if you want to learn how to build persuasive presentations in 5 days, join my free email course where I will cover everything from structure and graphs to slide titles. You can join it by clicking on the link in the description. The last step of the PBS framework is the hardest part, but it's also most rewarding because you will need to suggest a solution or at least the next steps to address the problem. If you can provide a detailed solution, then great. Add data to support it or any opinions that your developers or other specialists have already mentioned to you. If you have no idea how to fix it and you need help with the solution, then propose the next steps. Remember to make actionable recommendations based on the data. Each recommendation should address a key insights and you should assign who's responsible for taking the next step. So let me give you just a summary example. If the insight is Apple Pay's conversion rate is down on iOS Safari, then the recommendation is prioritize a ticket in the backlog to fix this issue in the next available sprint. Then the assignee would be Bob to create the ticket and Laura to prioritize in the backlog by the end of the week. And I just can't stress how important this is. In my previous job, we had many cases where we identified the problem and even solution to it, but we never made any next steps. So it was just kind of forgotten for months because no one was responsible. You need to have someone responsible to make sure this issue gets addressed. Just adding it to the end of the backlog means nothing if you have another 155 items on it, right? It's just going to get buried there. This is something I also cover in my e-commerce presentation academy, where I'll show you my simple system to transfer e-commerce data into visualizations and management-ready slides. Using the system will give you the praise your work deserves from your colleagues and managers. So if you want to learn this, check out the link. It will be down in the description. Here are a few things you will need before you can start with storytelling. First of all, make sure you already looked into the data and have some insights. Because with storytelling, you'll be able to structure your slides into a cohesive story so that your colleagues and stakeholders can get actionable insights. But you need to know the building blocks from the start. Second, before anything, always think about what your goal is with the presentation, and more importantly, think about your audience and what their goals and KPIs are. How can you align your goals with their goals? For example, if you present to the management team, think what type of data they would need to make a decision. Probably you don't want to show too granular stuff for management, but more insights that can impact the whole company on a larger scale. To make it easier for them, make sure they can take the data and the insights from your slides and then present them to their management as well. Another tip I have for you is not to start building individual slides until you have a storyline. It might sound a little strange at this point, but you'll see in a minute why and how it's possible. Okay, now that I've explained the framework, let me show you how to do it in practice. Remember, your action titles should tell the story and your slides should back up whatever you claim in the action title. This means if someone reads just the titles, they should be able to know about the problem and get at least a hint of the solution. And that's the thing, it's easy to structure your story by just taking the titles and arranging them according to the framework. And the big consulting companies like McKinsey recommend putting it all first in Word document instead of PowerPoint. So the titles and explanations go there. If you are a visual person, you could also use whiteboard or sticky notes. This way you can easily move things around, make it into a cohesive story, and it's a great way to spot any gaps and see if there's anything missing from your story. Because it's just easier to see the whole picture in a Word document, and also if you need people to sign off the structure and the slide contents, then it's easier to do in the Word than the PowerPoint. In PowerPoint, you cannot have an overview. Once you have the flow of the story, as well as the data to support it, you can move everything into slides and then just adjust slightly where you need it. You know, it sometimes just doesn't work as well in slides as in a Word document. So you just adjust it a little bit there. So let's next work on an example. Here's a typical report that you might see in e-commerce where you need your stakeholders to make a decision. So you can see I have a presentation here, and I usually like to just, state what is at stake just in the title as well. So when people walk into the room, they can see and they're interested already when they see just this on the screen. So from here, what I've done is I went through all of my titles, and I've just added them to basically to this document. And you can see that here's the same title, and then all the action titles are here. Obviously, this is a presentation I already prepared before, so it flows correctly, but I just want to show you that it still follows the same structure. So you start with, if you look at the number 1, number 2, you notice that they kind of talk about the background. Hey, this is what we kind of discovered, and this is the issue. So you can see that if we just mark that, you see that's we kind of preparing. Then we went into the analysis. Here's the problem, and this is why it matters, right? This is like what 50,000 per month. That's what we're losing. That's what we established. So all of that is basically the results from analysis. So it describes the problem, and then we go into the solution. So how do we actually go and fix this problem? So the rest 4 here, they're basically just about that. I also have next steps here, and if I just highlight that, you'll notice that there's a nice structure to it. It starts with a little bit of background, then we describe the problem and go a bit deeper into the data. And in this case, there's a lot of slides for solution, although they're not very long. And did you notice how the action titles flow naturally? They read like a small story. If you want to learn how to do this, you can watch this video right here, where I dig deeper into action titles for e-commerce and rules for writing them more effectively.